Picture yourself in medieval Europe, during one of the most dramatic periods of human history, spanning from the High Middle Ages to the dawn of the modern era. From the 12th to the 16th centuries, a shadow of fear and suspicion spread across Western Europe, as the Catholic Church wielded unprecedented power through one of its most formidable institutions, the Inquisition. The story of the Inquisition unfolded primarily across three powerful kingdoms: Spain, where it reached its zenith under the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella; France, where it first took root in the struggle against the Cathars; and Italy, where Rome itself served as the heart of ecclesiastical authority. In these lands, the very fabric of society was woven with threads of religious devotion and political intrigue. The Roman Catholic Church stood as the dominant force in medieval Europe, its influence extending far beyond spiritual matters into the realm of politics, education, and daily life. Working alongside, and sometimes in competition with the Church, were the emerging European monarchies, each seeking to consolidate their power while maintaining delicate alliances with religious authorities. The political landscape was a complex tapestry of tensions between ecclesiastical and secular powers. Bishops and cardinals wielded both spiritual and temporal authority, while kings and nobles sought to maintain their independence from church control. This power struggle would often manifest in dramatic confrontations, with the Inquisition serving as a powerful tool for both religious and political control. Medieval society operated within a rigid hierarchical structure, where birth determined destiny. At the top stood the nobility and high-ranking clergy, who controlled vast lands and wielded immense influence. Below them, the common people, craftsmen, merchants, and peasants, struggled to survive while navigating the complex demands of both their earthly and spiritual masters. This period also witnessed the gradual decline of the feudal system, as growing towns and cities fostered the emergence of a merchant class that would eventually challenge traditional power structures. The very atmosphere of medieval Europe during the Inquisition was thick with sensory experiences that defined daily life. The rhythmic tolling of church bells marked the hours, calling the faithful to prayer and sometimes summoning crowds to witness public trials and executions. The streets echoed with the sound of public proclamations, while in darker corners, frightened whispers spread news of the latest arrests and accusations. Inside the great cathedrals, the sweet smell of incense filled the air during Mass, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that reinforced the Church's authority. Yet this sacred scent would sometimes mingle with the acrid smoke of execution pyres, where those condemned as heretics met their fate. The cold, damp stones of prison cells and torture chambers bore silent witness to countless interrogations, while rough-hewn wooden benches in tribunal halls supported the weight of both judges and accused. The visual landscape was equally striking. Inquisitors moved through the streets in their distinctive dark robes, their very presence inspiring fear and reverence. Common people wore simple homespun garments that reflected their modest means, while nobles adorned themselves in rich fabrics and jewels that proclaimed their status. The architecture of the period served as a constant reminder of power and authority. Soaring cathedrals with their pointed arches and stained glass windows reached toward heaven, while fortified castles and tribunal buildings spoke of earthly power and judgment. Technological advancement during this period was primarily focused on instruments of control and confession. The dungeons of the Inquisition contained various devices designed to extract confessions, while the later introduction of the printing press would eventually serve both as a tool for spreading official doctrine and, ironically, as a means for disseminating new ideas that would challenge the Church's authority. This was the world of the Inquisition, a time when faith, fear, and power intertwined to create one of history's most notorious institutions. The stage was set for a drama that would unfold over centuries, leaving an indelible mark on European civilization and human consciousness that resonates to this day. At the heart of our story stands Father Alfonso de Torquemada, a fictional inquisitor general whose life embodies the complex moral struggles of the Spanish Inquisition. Born into a noble family with deep ties to the Church, Alfonso rose through ecclesiastical ranks with unwavering devotion to Catholic orthodoxy. His commanding presence, enhanced by his tall stature and penetrating dark eyes, strikes fear into the hearts of those brought before his tribunal. Yet beneath his stern exterior lies a soul increasingly tortured by doubt. Alfonso's character draws inspiration from his historical cousin, Tomás de Torquemada, the first Grand Inquisitor of Spain. Tomás, appointed by Queen Isabella in 1483, set the foundation for the Spanish Inquisition's systematic persecution of heretics. His notorious reputation stems from his role in interrogating over 100,000 people, with thousands condemned to death. This historical figure's zealous dedication to religious purity serves as both inspiration and warning in Alfonso's own journey. As Alfonso presides over his tribunals, he encounters Maria, a local healer whose story becomes intertwined with his own spiritual crisis. Maria, known throughout the region for her knowledge of medicinal herbs and gentle healing touch, represents the ancient wisdom that the Church often viewed with suspicion. Her modest appearance belies an unshakable inner strength that grows stronger with each trial she faces. Though initially arrested on accusations of witchcraft, her dignity in the face of persecution transforms her from a simple victim into a powerful symbol of resistance against religious tyranny. In the shadowy corridors of power moves Duke Hernando, a calculating nobleman who exemplifies how the Inquisition often served political ambitions as much as religious purposes. His elegant attire and courtly manners mask a ruthless determination to eliminate his rivals through false accusations of heresy. The Duke's manipulation of both church and state powers reveals the corrupt intersection of spiritual and temporal authority that characterized the period. Providing a moral counterpoint to the Inquisition severity is Friar Tomás, a compassionate monk whose gentle nature and scholarly wisdom lead him to question the brutal methods employed in the name of faith. His simple brown habit and humble demeanor contrast sharply with the imposing black robes of the Inquisitors, yet his quiet resistance proves equally powerful. Through his secret acts of mercy, helping accused heretics escape and offering comfort to prisoners, Friar Tomás embodies the true Christian virtues of compassion and forgiveness. Leading the underground resistance against the Inquisition is Juan, a former priest whose spiritual journey led him to reject the Church's dogma. His transformation from devoted servant of the Church to leader of a heretical movement mirrors the broader religious upheaval of the time. Juan's followers include not only religious dissidents but also intellectuals, artists, and common people seeking spiritual truth beyond the confines of orthodox doctrine. As our story unfolds, we witness profound transformations in our central characters. Father Alfonso's journey from zealous defender of the faith to a man haunted by moral doubt reflects the larger ethical questions surrounding religious persecution. His initial certainty crumbles as he witnesses the human cost of the Inquisition's methods, forcing him to confront the contradiction between his duty to the Church and his growing awareness of the injustice he perpetuates. Maria's evolution proves equally compelling. Her initial fear and confusion give way to a remarkable strength of spirit. Through her public defiance of the Inquisition's authority, she becomes more than just an accused witch. She emerges as a beacon of hope for others facing persecution. Her transformation challenges not only the power of the Inquisition, but also medieval society's views on women and traditional knowledge. The internal conflicts driving these characters create a complex web of motivations and consequences. Father Alfonso struggles between his lifelong dedication to the Church and his awakening conscience, a battle that manifests in sleepless nights and increasing hesitation to condemn the accused. His crisis of faith reflects the broader questionings that would eventually lead to the Reformation. Juan's internal conflict stems from his deep spiritual longing and the terrible price of pursuing truth in an age of dogma. His secret meetings with followers, conducted in shadowy cellars and remote forests, carry the constant threat of discovery and execution. Yet his fear of persecution wages a constant battle with his conviction that the Church has strayed from Christ's true teachings. These characters, both fictional and historical, embody the complex moral, spiritual, and political struggles that define the Inquisition era. Their interweaving stories reveal how institutions of power affect individual lives, and how personal conscience can stand against systemic oppression. Through their experiences, we gain insight into one of history's darkest periods and the timeless human capacity for both cruelty and courage in the name of faith. At its core, the Inquisition represents one of history's most powerful examples of how fear can be weaponized to control society. In medieval Europe, the mere whisper of the word Inquisition could silence conversations, empty streets, and turn neighbor against neighbor. This institutionalized system of fear wasn't merely a religious tribunal. It was a sophisticated mechanism of social control that would influence European society for centuries to come. The Inquisition's power rested on a foundation of carefully cultivated terror. Accusations could come from anywhere: a disgruntled neighbor, a business rival, or even a family member seeking to prove their own orthodoxy. The process itself was designed to maximize psychological pressure: secret denunciations, surprise arrests, indefinite imprisonment, and the ever-present threat of torture. Those accused often faced an impossible choice: confess to crimes they hadn't committed or endure increasingly severe questioning until they did. At the heart of this system lies the fundamental conflict between religious orthodoxy and intellectual freedom. The Church, positioning itself as the sole arbiter of truth, sought to maintain control over not just religious practice but thought itself. This struggle manifested in countless individual dramas: scholars forced to recant their findings, healers condemned for practicing traditional medicine, and freethinkers branded as heretics for questioning official doctrine. The corruption of institutional power reveals itself in the way the Inquisition's authority was often wielded for personal gain. Noble families would denounce rivals to seize their properties. Local officials would use accusations of heresy to eliminate political opponents. Even within the church, ambitious clergy would sometimes use the Inquisition's machinery to advance their careers or settle personal vendettas. This corruption was particularly insidious because it wrapped itself in the cloak of religious righteousness. The stark contrast between religious fanaticism and human compassion emerges as another crucial theme. While some inquisitors genuinely believed they were saving souls through their harsh methods, others, like our fictional Friar Tomás, recognized the fundamental contradiction between Christ's teachings of love and mercy and the Inquisition's practices of torture and execution. This internal conflict within the Church itself would eventually contribute to broader questioning of institutional authority. The manipulation of faith for political ends stands as one of the Inquisition's most enduring lessons. Religious persecution often aligned conveniently with political objectives, particularly in Spain, where the Inquisition helped forge national unity by targeting religious minorities. The expulsion of Jews and Muslims, alongside the persecution of converts suspected of secretly maintaining their old faiths, demonstrated how religious purity could serve as a pretext for political and social engineering. The story's development follows a careful arc that mirrors society's evolving relationship with the Inquisition. Initially, we see the institution presented as it saw itself, a necessary guardian of faith and social order. The Inquisition's defenders argued that only through strict enforcement of orthodoxy could society be protected from the corruption of heretical ideas. Public ceremonies and carefully staged trials reinforced this image of divine authority and justice. As our narrative progresses, cracks begin to appear in this righteous facade. Whispered stories of torture become public knowledge. Political motivations behind certain prosecutions become increasingly obvious. The wealth confiscated from condemned heretics raises questions about the Inquisition's true priorities. Through characters like Maria and Juan, we witness the human cost of the system, while through Father Alfonso, we see how even true believers begin to question their role in this machinery of persecution. The story reaches its climax during Maria's public trial, a moment that crystallizes all the underlying tensions and conflicts. Her defiant stance against her accusers, spoken with the quiet authority of truth, forces both characters and audience to confront the fundamental questions about faith, power, and human dignity. This pivotal scene serves as a mirror, reflecting the larger struggle between institutional power and individual conscience. The subsequent discovery that a high-ranking church official secretly harbors heretical beliefs serves as both anticlimax and revelation. This twist reinforces the story's central theme about the ultimate futility of attempting to control human thought and belief. Even within the very institution dedicated to enforcing orthodoxy, alternative ideas and beliefs persist. Throughout the narrative, careful foreshadowing hints at these deeper truths. Early rumors about questionable methods, initially dismissed as malicious gossip, gain credibility as the story unfolds. Small acts of resistance, like Friar Tomás's secret aid to prisoners, suggest that not everyone accepts the Inquisition's authority. These subtle hints prepare us for the larger revelations to come while reinforcing the atmosphere of suspicion and hidden truths that characterize the era. This complex interplay of themes, fear as a tool of control, the corruption of power, the conflict between dogma and conscience, and the manipulation of faith for political ends, continues to resonate today. The Inquisition stands as a powerful reminder of how institutions can use fear and faith to control populations, and how the human spirit can nonetheless maintain its capacity for resistance and independent thought even in the darkest of times. Life during the Inquisition was shaped by an atmosphere of perpetual vigilance, where every action, word, and gesture could be scrutinized for signs of heresy. The rhythm of daily life was marked by the constant tolling of church bells, calling the faithful to numerous religious obligations that structured their days, weeks, and seasons. From dawn to dusk, religious observance wasn't merely a matter of personal devotion. It was a public performance necessary for survival. In every village and city, the day began with morning mass, where attendance was carefully noted by both clergy and neighbors. The practice of religion extended far beyond mere church attendance. It permeated every aspect of daily life. People crossed themselves before eating, invoked saints before beginning work, and recited prayers at regular intervals throughout the day. These weren't simply acts of faith. They were vital demonstrations of Orthodox Catholic behavior, performed as much for watching neighbors as for God. The atmosphere of surveillance transformed communities into networks of informal spies. Neighbors watched neighbors, servants observed their masters, and even family members monitored one another. A missed mass, an unconventional prayer, or even the smell of cooking pork, used to detect secret Jews, could lead to denunciation. This constant scrutiny created a society where privacy became nearly impossible and where every deviation from normal behavior could spark suspicious whispers. The practice of confession took on new significance during the Inquisition. Beyond its spiritual purpose, confession became a tool of social control and surveillance. Priests were required to report suspicious confessions to inquisitorial authorities, turning the sacred seal of the confessional into another mechanism of control. Public penance, often involving humiliating displays in church or in the streets, served as both punishment and warning to others. The social structure of the time was rigidly hierarchical, with the church and nobility working in close alliance to maintain their power. At the top of the ecclesiastical hierarchy stood the bishops and inquisitors, whose authority often surpassed that of local secular rulers. Below them, an army of priests, monks, and religious officials maintained the church's presence in every aspect of life. The nobility, while occasionally chafing under ecclesiastical authority, generally supported the Inquisition as a tool for maintaining social order and protecting their own privileges. For the common people, peasants, artisans, and small merchants, life was a constant balancing act between economic survival and religious conformity. Markets and trades were regulated by religious calendars and restrictions. Working on holy days could bring punishment, yet missing too many workdays could mean starvation. The economic impact of being accused of heresy was devastating. Property could be confiscated, businesses ruined, and entire families reduced to beggary. The medieval worldview was deeply infused with supernatural beliefs. Miracles were not just possible but expected, and divine intervention was seen in everything from weather patterns to personal misfortunes. This mindset created a complex tapestry where official Catholic doctrine intertwined with local superstitions and folk practices. The Church struggled to maintain control over this blend of beliefs, often incorporating popular practices it couldn't suppress while condemning others as heretical. Religious rituals and purification ceremonies became increasingly elaborate during this period. Public exorcisms drew large crowds, serving as both spiritual spectacle and warning about the dangers of demonic influence. These demonstrations reinforced the Church's power while simultaneously stoking fears about supernatural threats and the need for ecclesiastical protection. The fear of denunciation profoundly shaped daily behavior. People modified their speech, dress, and eating habits to avoid any hint of unorthodoxy. Certain words or phrases could raise suspicion, leading to the development of careful patterns of speech and behavior that became part of the social fabric. Public confessions and acts of penance served as regular reminders of the consequences of deviation, creating a climate where conformity became the highest virtue. Among the most vulnerable were the conversos, Jews and Muslims who had converted to Christianity, either by choice or under duress. These converts lived under constant suspicion, their every action scrutinized for signs of secretly maintaining their former faith. Simple actions like changing clothes on Friday evening, possibly indicating secret Jewish Sabbath observance, or avoiding pork could lead to accusations of crypto-Judaism. Women faced particular challenges during the Inquisition. The prevailing theology viewed women as morally weaker and more susceptible to demonic influence, making them especially vulnerable to accusations of witchcraft. Traditional female roles, such as midwifery and healing, became increasingly dangerous as such practices could be interpreted as witchcraft. The persecution of women healers represented a broader conflict between traditional knowledge and officially sanctioned medicine and theology. This conflict between traditional and official knowledge extended beyond healing practices. The Church sought to control not just religious orthodoxy, but also what constituted acceptable knowledge and learning. Traditional wisdom passed down through generations came under increasing suspicion, especially when it originated from non-Christian sources. This created a tension between practical knowledge that had served communities for generations and the officially sanctioned learning promoted by religious authorities. Living in this environment required a careful balance between maintaining appearances and surviving daily life. People developed complex strategies for navigating social interactions, religious obligations, and economic necessities while avoiding any behavior that might attract unwanted attention. This constant pressure created a society where outward conformity masked a range of private beliefs and practices, and where the fear of denunciation became a powerful tool for maintaining social control. The Inquisition drastically changed everyday life in medieval Europe. What aspect of this social transformation have you found most impactful so far? Share your thoughts in the comments. The arrival of Father Alfonso de Torquemada marked the beginning of a new era of religious persecution in the city. His inaugural sermon, delivered from the cathedral's ornate pulpit, echoed through the cobblestone streets like a harbinger of doom. "We shall cleanse this city of its spiritual corruption," he proclaimed, his voice carrying both authority and terrible promise. The gathered crowd, a sea of bowed heads and nervous glances, understood the weight of his words. Within days, the first accusations began to surface. The machinery of the Inquisition ground into motion with terrifying efficiency. Informants emerged from the shadows, eager to prove their orthodoxy by denouncing others. The first arrests sent shockwaves through the community, but it was the detention of Maria, the beloved local healer, that truly revealed the Inquisition's brutal nature. Her arrest in the early hours of dawn, torn from her modest home while treating a sick child, demonstrated that no one was beyond suspicion. Maria's interrogation exposed the Inquisition's methodical cruelty. The officially sanctioned torture sessions were conducted with clinical precision, each method carefully documented by scribes. The implements of torture, the rack, the strappado, the water torture, were presented as tools of salvation, meant to extract confessions that would save the soul of the accused. Yet Maria's unwavering spirit, even in the face of such torment, began to stir something in the conscience of Father Alfonso. The discovery of Juan's heretical network came through a series of careful investigations and extracted confessions. What began as whispered meetings in cellars and forest clearings had grown into an organized movement questioning church doctrine. Their teachings, blending Christian mysticism with forbidden texts, offered a vision of faith free from institutional control. The network included not just religious dissidents but artists, scholars, and even members of prominent families, revealing the deep undercurrents of discontent with church authority. The involvement of Duke Hernando emerged gradually through a web of suspicious connections and convenient accusations. The pattern became clear: those accused of heresy often happened to be the Duke's political rivals or holders of properties he coveted. The Duke's manipulation of the Inquisition for personal gain represented a corruption of both spiritual and temporal power, a perversion that would eventually contribute to Father Alfonso's crisis of faith. Tension reached new heights with the discovery of Friar Tomas's clandestine assistance to the accused. This gentle monk, known for his scholarly wisdom and compassion, had been secretly helping prisoners escape and warning potential targets of impending arrests. His capture represented a crucial moment. Here was a man of unquestionable faith choosing conscience over obedience. The public reaction to his arrest revealed growing doubts about the Inquisition's methods. The most shocking revelation came with the exposure of one of the Inquisitor General's closest advisors as a secret member of Juan's heretical movement. This discovery shook the very foundations of the tribunal. How could heresy penetrate the very heart of the institution meant to eradicate it? The scandal forced many to question the effectiveness of fear and force in maintaining true faith. These events played out against the backdrop of larger historical forces, particularly the expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492. This massive displacement of people, many of whom had lived in Spain for generations, created new tensions as converted Jews, conversos, faced increasing suspicion. The sight of Jewish families forced to abandon their homes and businesses, many choosing baptism over exile, added another layer of moral complexity to the period. The impact on Father Alfonso was profound. Each new revelation, each witness torture session, each execution order he was required to sign, eroded his certainty. His nights became haunted by doubts, his prayers interrupted by questions about the true nature of faith and justice. The transformation of Maria from a simple healer into a symbol of resistance particularly affected him. Her quiet dignity in the face of torture, her unwavering commitment to truth, forced him to confront the contradiction between his actions and his Christian values. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate about a hidden sacred text, perhaps an ancient gospel or mystical revelation, that supposedly contained truths that could undermine the Church's authority. This mysterious document became a focal point for both the Inquisition's searches and the Resistance's hopes. Whether real or mythical, the very idea of its existence represented the enduring human desire for spiritual truth beyond institutional control. Behind the public drama, intricate political negotiations unfolded between the Crown and the Church. The monarchy sought to use the Inquisition as a tool for centralizing power, while the Church worked to maintain its independence. These hidden power struggles influenced which accusations were pursued, which families were targeted, and which regions faced the heaviest persecution. As events reached their climax, the city became a powder keg of tension. Maria's public trial, the exposure of political corruption, and the growing resistance to the Inquisition's methods all converged to create a moment of crisis. The outcome would not only determine the fate of individual characters but would reveal deeper truths about the nature of faith, power, and human conscience in an age of religious persecution. The medieval period witnessed a profound interweaving of cultural and intellectual elements, all deeply influenced by the Catholic Church's omnipresent authority. Religious art played a pivotal role in this era, with painters and sculptors creating works specifically designed to evoke both devotion and fear in the faithful. Church walls and altars were adorned with vivid depictions of heaven and hell, saints and demons, serving as powerful visual sermons for the largely illiterate population. These artistic works often featured intricate details of divine punishment and redemption, making complex theological concepts accessible to common people. In the realm of literature, one of the most influential works was the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, written in 1487 by Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger. This manual for inquisitors became the definitive guide for identifying, prosecuting, and punishing supposed witches. Its widespread circulation contributed significantly to the witch hunts that would plague Europe for centuries. The text combined theological arguments with detailed procedural instructions, reflecting the period's fusion of religious doctrine with judicial practice. The musical landscape of the era was dominated by Gregorian chants, which served as the soundtrack to medieval religious life. These haunting melodies, sung in Latin by monks and clergy, created an atmosphere of otherworldly devotion in churches and monasteries. Alongside these official church songs, popular music often reflected the religious tensions of the time, with folk songs incorporating themes of divine judgment, supernatural encounters, and moral warnings. The Catholic Church's influence extended far beyond spiritual matters, deeply penetrating daily life and political structures. Church officials wielded tremendous power, acting as advisors to rulers, administrators of justice, and guardians of moral order. The church calendar determined workdays, festivals, and fasting periods, while religious rituals marked every significant life event from birth to death. A fascinating tension existed between empirical knowledge and religious doctrine during this period. Early scientific observations and discoveries often faced scrutiny from church authorities who were concerned about challenges to established theological interpretations. This created a complex dynamic where scholars had to carefully frame their findings within acceptable religious parameters or risk accusations of heresy. Tales of diabolic pacts and demonic possessions captured the medieval imagination, spreading through communities and shaping collective fears. These stories served multiple purposes. They reinforced religious authority, explained misfortunes, and provided cautionary tales against straying from orthodox beliefs. Such legends often combined elements of local folklore with official church teachings about the supernatural. Monasteries emerged as crucial centers of learning, where monks painstakingly copied and preserved ancient texts. However, these same institutions also served as centers of censorship, determining which knowledge was acceptable for preservation and transmission. Monks would selectively copy texts, sometimes modifying or omitting content that conflicted with Christian doctrine. The period's intellectual life was characterized by intense theological debates about the nature of heresy and the boundaries of orthodox belief. These discussions took place in newly established universities, where scholars used complex logical arguments to explore religious questions. The debates often focused on reconciling classical philosophy with Christian theology, leading to the development of scholasticism. This era's intellectual achievements reflected a delicate balance between preservation and innovation, faith and reason, control and creativity. While the Church's authority could be restrictive, it also provided the institutional framework that supported medieval intellectual life. The period's cultural and intellectual legacy continues to influence our understanding of the relationship between religion, knowledge, and society. The complex tapestry of medieval Europe was profoundly shaped by interactions between different religious and cultural groups, particularly in the vibrant crossroads of the Iberian Peninsula. This region witnessed a unique coexistence, known as convivencia, between Christians, Jews, and Muslims, though this relationship was often marked by periods of both tolerance and intense conflict. In cities like Toledo and Córdoba, these communities initially shared knowledge, traded goods, and influenced each other's cultural practices, creating a rich multicultural society that was unique in medieval Europe. Trade routes served as crucial conduits not only for goods, but also for the transmission of ideas deemed heretical by religious authorities. Merchants traveling between different regions inadvertently became carriers of alternative religious viewpoints, philosophical concepts, and cultural practices. The Silk Road and Mediterranean maritime routes particularly facilitated this exchange, bringing Eastern philosophical and religious concepts that sometimes challenged established Christian orthodoxy. These trading networks created unofficial channels for the spread of various religious interpretations, including Cathar beliefs from the East and Jewish mystical traditions. The diplomatic landscape of medieval Europe was significantly influenced by religious persecution, as different kingdoms negotiated complex agreements regarding the treatment and extradition of accused heretics. These diplomatic arrangements often reflected the political power dynamics of the time, with stronger kingdoms pressuring weaker ones to cooperate in religious persecutions. Treaties were drawn up specifying procedures for capturing, trying, and transferring accused heretics across borders, creating an early form of international law enforcement focused on religious dissent. The Crusades fundamentally transformed European perceptions of non-Christian peoples and cultures. While initially launched as military campaigns to reclaim the Holy Land, these expeditions exposed European Christians to Islamic civilization, Byzantine culture, and Eastern Christian traditions. This exposure had paradoxical effects. While it broadened cultural horizons and led to the adoption of foreign innovations, it also hardened religious boundaries and reinforced stereotypes about infidels. The Crusaders' experiences influenced European art, architecture, and literature, while simultaneously contributing to a more militant approach to religious differences. The Moorish influence on Spanish culture created particularly complex dynamics. The sophisticated Moorish civilization brought advancements in architecture, mathematics, medicine, and agriculture to the Iberian Peninsula. However, as the Christian Reconquista gained momentum, there was an increasing rejection of these Moorish cultural elements. This cultural tension manifested in various ways, from the conversion of mosques into churches to the suppression of Arabic learning and scientific knowledge. Yet, despite attempts to erase this influence, many Moorish cultural elements became permanently integrated into Spanish society, visible in its architecture, language, and customs. The long-term consequences of religious persecution created significant demographic and intellectual shifts across Europe. Jewish communities, frequently targeted during periods of social unrest, were repeatedly expelled from various kingdoms, leading to the dispersal of skilled artisans, merchants, and scholars. The exodus of these communities often resulted in economic decline in their former homes and cultural enrichment in their new destinations. Similarly, the persecution of various Christian groups deemed heretical led to the migration of intellectuals and craftsmen, affecting the distribution of knowledge and skills across Europe. This period of intense religious interaction and conflict had lasting effects on European society. It contributed to the development of complex legal systems for dealing with religious differences, influenced patterns of urban development and architecture, and shaped educational and intellectual traditions. The experience of managing religious diversity, albeit often through persecution and exclusion, laid some of the groundwork for later developments in religious tolerance and multicultural coexistence. The legacy of these interactions continues to influence modern discussions about religious tolerance, cultural integration, and the relationship between state power and religious authority. The period serves as both a cautionary tale about the dangers of religious persecution and an example of how different cultural and religious traditions can, under certain circumstances, coexist and enrich each other, despite significant tensions and conflicts. The dramatic resignation of Father Alfonso from his position as an inquisitor, coupled with his public denunciation of inquisitorial methods, marks a pivotal moment in the history of religious persecution. His bold stance against the established system, questioning the morality and effectiveness of using torture and fear as tools of faith, sparked immediate controversy and lasting repercussions. This act of conscience from a high-ranking church official demonstrated that even within the system, voices of dissent could emerge when confronted with the human cost of religious persecution. The immediate aftermath saw unprecedented public upheaval, with populations in various regions staging protests against inquisitorial courts. These demonstrations reflected growing public disillusionment with the harsh methods employed in the name of religious purity. The unrest marked an early instance of organized resistance against institutional religious authority, foreshadowing larger movements to come. Looking at longer-term impacts, the seeds of both the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment can be traced to this period of questioning and unrest. The public challenges to religious authority, combined with growing skepticism about the Church's methods, contributed to an intellectual climate that would eventually foster major religious and philosophical movements. Martin Luther's later criticisms of church practices echoed earlier concerns about the abuse of religious authority, while Enlightenment thinkers would build upon these foundations to advocate for religious tolerance and rational inquiry. The influence of this period on modern judicial systems cannot be overstated. Many contemporary legal principles, including the presumption of innocence, the right to legal representation, and protections against torture, emerged as direct responses to the excesses of inquisitorial procedures. The development of human rights concepts can be partly traced to the reaction against the systematic violations of human dignity during the Inquisition era. Several crucial lessons emerge from this historical period. First, the dangers of religious extremism and the manipulation of fear for political or social control become starkly apparent. When religious institutions become too closely intertwined with political power, the potential for abuse increases dramatically. The importance of maintaining separation between church and state emerged as a key principle from this historical experience. Additionally, the value of religious tolerance and freedom of thought became increasingly recognized as essential elements of a stable and just society. Contemporary parallels to this historical period are both striking and concerning. Modern political discourse often employs fear as a tool for manipulation, whether through exaggerated threats of terrorism, economic collapse, or social decay. The persecution of minority groups and political dissidents continues in various forms worldwide, often using sophisticated modern technologies for surveillance and control. Information manipulation and modern witch hunts persist, now amplified through social media and mass communication channels. One of the most challenging questions that emerges from this historical analysis is how societies can effectively balance security concerns with individual liberties. This tension, which was central to the inquisitorial period, remains relevant today. Modern governments face similar challenges in determining the appropriate limits of surveillance and control in the name of public safety, while protecting individual rights and freedoms. The methods of modern persecution have evolved, becoming more sophisticated and often less visible. Instead of physical torture chambers, we now see psychological manipulation, social ostracism, and economic pressure used as tools of control. The court of public opinion, amplified by social media, can serve as a modern form of inquisition, where accusations can destroy reputations and livelihoods without due process. Father Alfonso's story serves as a reminder that individual conscience and moral courage can stand against systemic injustice. His decision to speak out against institutional abuse demonstrates how personal conviction can contribute to broader social change. This historical example continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about whistleblowers, institutional accountability, and moral responsibility. The legacy of this period also highlights the importance of maintaining vigilance against the gradual erosion of civil liberties. Just as the Inquisition's powers expanded incrementally over time, modern surveillance states and restrictive policies often develop gradually, making it crucial for societies to remain alert to subtle shifts in the balance between security and freedom. As we reflect on this historical period, it becomes clear that the fundamental questions it raised about authority, justice, and human rights remain relevant today. The challenge lies in applying these historical lessons to contemporary issues, ensuring that past mistakes are not repeated in new forms. The ongoing struggle to balance societal security with individual rights and freedoms continues to shape our political and social discourse, making the study of this period not just historically interesting but practically relevant for modern governance and society. The Inquisition left a profound mark on European history, with echoes that resonate to this day. How do you think we can apply the lessons of this dark period to the world today? Share your reflections in the comments, like if the video was enlightening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Medieval Chronicles channel for more fascinating explorations of the Middle Ages.